So Díobh agus fáilte romh ag an sesiún ólas seo le glúiseach na Horpa in Éireann agus Coláiste na Hórpa, starting today with a few words as Gaeilge in the Irish language after this week was a very special and important turning point for us, and especially for me as an Irish language speaker. I would think it's important to highlight such a change and the end of the derogation of Irish and it now having full status as an EU language. So it's quite important to us in Ireland. We see the value of languages for students attending the College of Europe, with careers with institutions and so on and so forth. So just to highlight that firstly, my name is Lisa Nickenbrev and I'm Head of Communications and Education at European Movement Ireland. And today we are co-hosting this event with the Economics Department of the College of Europe. And I suppose the idea originally sprung from some wonderful Trinity College Dublin alumni who are also College of Europe alumni at the Department of Economics. And we noticed a kind of a bridge there, so hence the name of the event, Building a Bridge. But indeed, as we've said and as we've advertised, this is open to everybody and anyone who takes an interest, in particular in economics, but of course just in applying to the college. And I'll be telling you a bit about scholarships for Irish students and where things are at the moment, for those who maybe aren't 100% sure what course they'd like to take to. And then we will be hearing from a range of speakers, as well as myself, Chair of the Irish College Europe Selection Committee, Professor Dermot Cahill will be speaking shortly, President of the Irish College of Europe Alumni Association, Mr. Cormac Little, and then I'll be passing over hosting duties for the second part of the event to Peter Claes from the college's economics department, and Peter will invite a few more people from the college's side and some alumni to speak about their experiences studying economics at the College of Europe and being an alum. Some of which you've had the pleasure to hear from Paul a couple of moments ago as well. So at the end of that then, as I say, we'll have a conversation, we'll have a discussion. Any questions anyone has, you can pop them in the chat at any point and we can come back to them, or feel free to raise your hand and say a few words at the end as well. Anything else as regards housekeeping? No. So just to say, if any of you haven't heard of ourselves and you're wondering why we're part of this, European Movement Ireland, we administer the selection process for students looking to attend the College of Europe and the allocation of the Irish government scholarships on behalf of the Irish government and the College of Europe here in Ireland. And we've been working on that for a number of years. I'm delighted to, because I suppose we see the relevance and the importance of Irish students being represented at the College of Europe, especially when it comes to graduate jobs in Europe, which is another programme that we run in encouraging young Irish graduates to pursue careers with the EU and with the institutions. And so the College of Europe we see as a real stepping stone to that. And we were delighted to see recently, as part of the new Government of Ireland's career strategy with regard to EU job opportunities, which is called A Career for EU, that was launched last May, that there was an increase in the number of scholarships for Irish students to go to the college by the Irish government. So there were traditionally 3 scholarships offered, 3 full scholarships to Irish students to attend the college, and that has been increased to 6, and with a further increase promised. So we hope to see more and more in future years and that governmental support for students to go to the college. So any of you who are considering applying, now is the best year in a long time to apply, with double the number of scholarships, but equally they will continue to increase. So anyone, we sometimes have people who are repeat applicants. It's always worth considering reapplying with the knowledge and the feedback perhaps from the first time, and perhaps there will be even more scholarships next year. So if you'd like to see a copy of that new career strategy, it's on dfa.ie/EU jobs. And European Movement Ireland, if you haven't heard of us, we're an NGO working on European affairs in Ireland since 1954, the longest established NGO working on European affairs. We're an independent, not-for-profit, membership-based organisation. And what we do is providing information about the EU, about Europe, and stimulating debate. And indeed, we run a number of education programmes, including our work on the College of Europe, of course, and the Blue Star programme, which we do with primary school kids in Ireland to educate them about Europe and the EU. And we're also part of a network called European Movement International, which has 39 national councils across the world. And our own CEO, Noel, is vice president of as well. So if you are considering applying from Ireland, you can get in touch with ourselves. You apply to the college directly, and then we'll be in touch after that point when the college process the applications. We are there for advice and guidance through the process. If anyone isn't sure of certain requirements or admission procedures, you can contact us at any point. Our email is info@europeanmovement.ie, and I advise taking a look at the website. We've lots of information up there. We have FAQs from previous years of Irish applicants, so there should be lots there to consider if you are going to apply, and I'll pop that link and that email into the chat when I finish speaking. And it's well worth considering this excellent Masters in European Economic Studies that Peter and colleagues will talk to you about. And of course, very often people pop down second choices, so keeping in mind all of the other courses that are available at Bruges and in Natalen as well, in interdisciplinary studies, law, and the various other areas. So thanks so much to the college for having us join today, and a few other colleagues here in Ireland. So I'll pass over to one of those, who is our very esteemed chair of the Irish College of Europe Selection Committee, Professor Dermot Cahill. Dermot, would you like to say a few words?
Great, thank you very much, Lisa, and welcome to everyone who's joining us today. I'm an alumni of the college, going back to the Mozart promotion in 91-92. Just for any of you who were logged on early and you were listening to Paul, who is an ancien, that's an alum from 1967-68, I joined with him. It's one of the best experiences of my life, to be in the college. At the time I was there were about 30 nationalities. All the EU states had students there, plus other states as well. I met my first person from Iceland, who's still a very good friend of mine. There was a student from Israel. There were students from Central European states who were on the accession trail. So I've made a great group of contacts all over the world that I can still use today. And that was very valuable, but really it was the experience of having superb professors, all top names in their fields, who would fly in and deliver courses in whatever modules one was studying. It was incredibly, enriching, very different from how an Irish university would operate. Very intensive, as I say, lots of study involved, but also a great cultural experience. And Bruges is an absolutely beautiful place to be a student. So I would recommend you to give it serious consideration.
Dermot, I'm not sure. Oh yeah, we just lost for a second. I think you're back there.
Am I back? Okay. So I want to talk to you about the interview and filling out the application form. The application form isn't very complex, but don't leave boxes unfilled. Okay, that's the first thing. Show you care, that you're serious about the application. And the most important part of the application form, from the selection committee's point of view, when we're deciding which candidates to call to interview, is the section about your motivation for wanting to study at the college. Okay? So, for example, it's always a good idea to have read the brochure of the college, which is online, and be familiar with the courses that are there, and maybe be able to suggest why one or two of the modules you're particularly interested in them, because, and let us see what your motivation is. Also, in your motivation statement, be thinking about what contribution will you make to the college. Don't just be thinking about what the college will give you, because it will confer on you a superb year of education and maybe changing your intellectual formation as well. But how can you contribute to the college? You may have some interest or some passion that you can bring to the college that will enrich it as a student community. So don't forget that either. Then when it comes to references, make sure your lecturers get their references in, okay? So don't be asking them at the last minute, or if you do, be really nice to them and ask them to write a detailed reference, not just a half-page reference. We want a good independent opinion of what you were really like as a student. So make sure you get your references in. And then on top of that, when it comes to the interview, you need to be prepared, because there are superb candidates competing for the places at the college. The great news is that we now have 6 instead of 3 scholarships. And some students will also go on top of that because they will self-fund themselves. So you're going to be up against top candidates from all of Ireland's universities. And so you need to show, for example, that you're up to date on European affairs. So I remember at last year's interviews, for example, students were being asked about the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline from Russia to Europe. I was amazed. They were very prepared. They were reading the news. Most of them knew a lot about this and were able to engage in discussion with a particular member of the panel who liked asking about this. So make sure you're up to date with current affairs. Make sure you know the difference between the Council and the Commission and the Court of Justice. Each year we'll find candidates who are fantastic on paper, and when somebody says, tell me, what's the role of the European Commission? They really can't give an answer. And it's not difficult to answer. So make sure that you're familiar with the EU's institutional structure as you prepare for the interview. And make sure you're in touch then with current affairs and also about Ireland and its role in the EU in the past, but also in the future. Now, of course, if you're an economics candidate, you'll know all about the European Central Bank, won't you? And the bailout with the ECB and the Troika and all of that kind of thing. So, in other words, what I'm saying to you is you need to prepare for the interview. The interview is only about 20 minutes long. So it's a short interview and you need to be on the ball. And really, that's as much as I'm going to say to you. Again, you will have other opportunities open to you. There will be other prestigious universities who will want to have a candidate like you. Irish candidates are highly rated internationally for graduate studies. But if you're thinking about looking at things from a European angle or European point of view, not just internally in Europe, but Europe out into the world, and you're an economist, then I would seriously urge you to consider studying at the economics faculty at the College of Europe. So hopefully we'll see some of you at the interview, which will be towards the end of March or start of April, thereabouts. Lisa's organisation, the European Movement, will confirm all of that on their website. So thank you, Lisa.
Thanks, Dermot, and thanks for joining us. That's it. So as I say, when an Irish student applies to the college, as with every other country, they go straight to Bruges or Nathlin, who process the applications, and then they come to us later for the shortlisting process. And I suppose it's important to say that we can't kind of give individual advice and guidance on what makes an excellent application. We more just guide people through the process of applying. And we don't get involved in the decision-making process. That's up to Dermot and his selection committee. We just administer the process. So just to be clear about our role too in European Movement. And the next person from the Irish side then is Cormac Little, who's with us. And Cormac is the president of the Irish College of Europe Alumni Association. So just to say hello there, Cormac.
Hello. Happy New Year to everybody, and thanks to Lisa for the invite. I keep my intervention short here, just by way of background. As Lisa said, I'm the head of the Irish branch of the Bruges National Alumni Association. I work as a lawyer here in one of the firms in town called William Fry, so obviously I'm a law graduate. Of Bruges, I can't talk about the economics course in too much detail. However, one point to mention, it was the case when I was at the college, and I'm sure it still is the case, that even you might be doing law, you might be doing economics, you might be doing politics, but there are a number of common courses. So we did study together with some of the economics students, and when I was there, and I'm sure that's still the case today. Just very briefly on the Alumni Association, its membership, it's a virtual organization. So I suppose this call is kind of fitting in a way. When I say it's a virtual organization, everybody, once they graduate, are deemed a member. We don't charge a subscription fee. We have no clubhouse, and really it's just a forum for primarily social, and obviously I don't need to tell you, in the last 2 years or so, those activities have been undermined for reasons that you're all aware of. But what we try and do is to bring graduates together. Obviously, the challenge with Bruges and Nathlin is that everybody's only there for a year. So unlike another quote unquote normal university where you might know people in the year ahead of you or in the year behind you, you don't have that possibility in Bruges or in National because it's a one-year course. So we try and kind of surmount those barriers in a way by getting people who may have been in the college around the same time, or indeed at very different times, and getting to know each other in a social setting. If you are fortunate enough to go to Bruges or National, in your case as economics students, you'll be going to Bruges, I assume. Once you graduate, you'll automatically become a member. I would echo and reiterate all the comments that both Dermot and Paul, whom I both know well, have made in terms of it was a fantastic experience for me. It is enriching intellectually, it's enriching socially. It's an experience that will stand you in good stead throughout your career, both professionally and socially. So if you are in any way interested, I have zero involvement in the application process. I would very much encourage you all to apply. It was a fantastic experience. And particularly in the post-Brexit scenario, it's very important that Ireland continues its keen involvement and participation in European affairs, and going to Bruges or National is obviously a stepping stone to a career in the wider European area. Just one quick plug, if you like. Dermot mentioned that his promotion was named after Mozart. And many of you may be aware that each promotion or year in Bruges / National is named after a famous European. Now, Mozart obviously needs no introduction. The gentleman after whom my year was named, called Ramon Llull, L-L-U-L-L. I think he's probably the only palindrome that ever had a year named after him. Don't think I've heard of him. I certainly hadn't heard of him before I went there, and I haven't heard of him since. But putting on the green jersey, if you like, there has never been an Irish patron de promotion. There's been lots of British, there's been French, there's been Germans, there's been Italians, Austrians, or etc., but there's never been an Irish patron, and this is something that we, through the Alumni Association, are trying to redress. Unfortunately, the key criterion to be a patron is that you have to be dead. So while there are many people around Irish people who are living who would be worthy candidates, we have to rely on the dead people. So we've got behind a campaign to have John Hume, who needs no introduction, and his commitment to European affairs needs no introductions. We've got behind it, Dermot and Paul and Lisa would be aware of this, we've got behind a campaign to have John Hume recognised. The great thing is that once you're dead, you're a potential candidate for the rest of eternity, if you like. So my successor and successors could be making the same plug in 20, 30, 40, 50 years' time. But hopefully our campaign to have John recognised in this way will be successful over the coming years. So if you do go to Bruges or National next year and John isn't successful in being named for 2022-23, this is something that I may be in touch with you. And so finally, just hand over to Peter, who's going to be next. If there are any graduates who are on this call who don't get the emails that we send out from time to time inviting you to social events, please send me an email. You Google me and you'll find me pretty quickly. Just send me an email and I'll make sure that you're on the database. Because unfortunately, we rely on people contacting us, because with GDPR, the college no longer gives us a list of the graduates. So we have to rely on them contacting us to update our database, rather than what happened pre-GDPR is the college tended to give us the email addresses, but for reasons that are obvious, they can't do that anymore. Anyway, so for those of you who are interested in going, please apply. If you're lucky enough to be successful, you'll have a fantastic year, and I cannot recommend it highly enough.
And if you are successful, you can come back and join Cormac and the Alumni Association. And if anyone, I think we've a mix on the call. I think we do have a couple of students who are at the college at present, and you can support Cormac's work. Looking to have John Hume named as patron. So if you'd like to do that, or you'd like to contact Cormac, you can just drop us an email to info@europeanmovement.ie and we can connect you with Cormac there. So thanks very much, Cormac. One thing I forgot to mention, just to be very clear on the Irish scholarships, people often ask us how to apply for the Irish government scholarships. when in fact there is no application process. You are automatically considered for the Irish government scholarships if you apply through Ireland. So it's basically selected as part of the interview process. The top performing candidates at interview will be awarded those scholarships. So there isn't an additional scholarship application process. The college also offers its own scholarships, such as the European Neighbourhood Policy Scholarship. And for that, you can apply. That's a separate essay that you attach to your application. So just to keep that in mind. So I'll pass over to Professor Klaus from the college's European Economics Studies Department, who will speak and invite a few more contributions from the college's side. And just a reminder, if you have any questions as you're hearing speakers, be sure to pop them in the chat and we'll come to them when we can. Thanks, folks, and thanks, Peter.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. And as you said, the name of this talk is Building a Bridge, so now let's go to the European side after the Irish side. First thing I wanted to say about the Irish the candidates, as of this year, and I guess Cormac is aware, actually the director proposed actually that anybody can propose a name for the next years and can vote for the next year's name of the how you call it, the name that will resound with each year's cohort. So this year, this first time, the procedure is open to everybody. So that's an opportunity maybe to push through John Hewitt. So that's an opportunity next year. I don't know till when the procedure is open, but for sure you can apply for that. I have prepared a short presentation, so I'll try to upload that while I speak. And I think it should be this one. Okay, so I hope you can see this. And let me.
We can, Peter. It's perfect.
Yep. Okay. So for the people who don't know the college yet and may be interested, I've prepared a presentation not just about the economics department, because I'm one of the professors at the economics department. But I've just organized it in a way that if there are students or people interested in other departments as well, so that they have a view on what kind of programs are offered. The thing I wanted to say there is that maybe in particular the economics program is very much interdisciplinary as well. So we have within the main economics track also sub-tracks, as we'll show later, which are a collaboration, say, between, for example, economics and law, economics and political science, European interdisciplinary track, and also we have a transatlantic program. So there's a lot of interaction between the departments. It's not that just it's pure economics, even if you can do that as well. But there are different tracks you can choose. So maybe to go back, the College of Europe founded in 1949, so quite a long time ago. But at the present, there has been a lot of changes in terms of the structure of the program, of course. And even if Paul said, in terms of spirit, probably it didn't change much. But at present, we have basically 5 master programs, of which, well, the first one I mentioned here is European Economic Studies program. But we also have an International Relations and Diplomacy Studies program. We have a European Law, LLM program. And we have a Master in European Political and Governance Studies. Those 4 programs are 1-year programs, and then we have, since a few years, the Master of Arts in Transatlantic Affairs, which is a 2-year program. That's the only 2-year program on offer in Bruges and the College of Europe. I'll focus mostly on the Economic Studies program. Now, if students or interested people have any questions about the other programs, don't hesitate to ask. We'll try to answer those as well. About the economics program. So, as I said, we have 4 sub-tracks. Once you choose economics, you can choose which track you want to study. And the first one is purely economics, say, that's European Economic Studies. And then we have a business track in which you would focus on European topics, but as well specialize in those specific items that are related to European integration and what business can get from that. Another track is European Law and Economic Analysis. That's mostly for people who are interested in the interaction between law and economics. And then we have a Public Policy Analysis, which is in cooperation with the Political Science Department, where you would mostly focus again on European economics, but mostly then on the policy side, on how you implement or how you evaluate public policies. Now, how the year looks like at the college, basically, well, we have a 2-semester system. In that sense, it's very much European. We have the first semester, which is mostly focusing on the compulsory courses. That's basically the basic courses together with econometrics. And then some general courses in European studies. The second semester, you basically go into different directions where you will mostly focus in smaller groups in the different subtracks. So you have still a few compulsory courses, and then you have the optional courses you will choose from the list that is quite extensive on each of those 4 subtracks. There are also a research seminar since this year, so we constantly make changes to the program. So this year we start with a research seminar, and we also have compact seminars that are either compulsory or optional, where you have specific topics or specific speakers that we invite from all across Europe or across the world, and they will talk about specific topics related to your field. The second semester is also a very intensive time because you have to focus on the master thesis, and you will be allocated to one of the professors at the department. Again, depending on the choice of your topic and the choice of your track, you will be allocated to one of the professors that may be a good match for you. The final thing we do really is then in a structure sense, because there's also a lot of extracurricular activities, are the study trips. So we organize study trips both to business. So we went to visit, for example, given the circumstances, it was not so easy, but we went to visit businesses in, for example, textile companies that export worldwide. In the first semester. Second semester, we are going to see how different public instances or administrations do implement European public policies or work on European projects together with other administrations. And then towards the end of the year, we typically visit the EIB in Luxembourg and the European Central Bank and European Court of Auditors. But that may change sometimes a bit on the preferences of the students. And that's how a typical year at a college looks like. Maybe one thing to say, I'm not aware of when the academic year starts in Ireland, but we start the 1st of September and we finish basically the last days of May. So everything is concluded by mid-June. Okay. The way the college works is that we have a few fixed professors at the department, and then we invite a lot of professors from all across Europe. And here we just have the current list of professors of this year. This does change every year depending on the kind of courses we evaluate and readapt to what people may need. For example, one of the things that we have been including in the last couple of years is, for example, climate change. And the head of our department, Professor De Mont, for example, is also the climate economics chair. But we look also, for example, at people who work in business on climate change, or people at the EIB who work on these topics. We also invite people from different institutions. So, for example, this year we have Isabel van Stinkest, who is the Director General at the ECB. We also have Professor Jonkers, who is, for example, the Editor-in-Chief at the Joint Research Council. We have then also academic professors, of course, from different universities. We have Professor Hendricks from UC Louvain. And Professor Clarice from ETH. So we do make a selection of professors. Mostly this group is stable, but every year we look to renovate, depending on the courses, a certain amount of professors. Okay. Now, the practical functioning of your academic year is basically that every professor will have an academic assistant. At the moment we have 3 academic assistants. And you closely will be in contact with these academic assistants. They will help you on each course to be in touch with these professors. Because you may say, well, a lot of these professors come from very far away, but you will get a very close link between yourself and how the academic assistants organize and help you with the courses. At this moment, we have students from about 46 countries, mostly EU countries, but also from the wider Europe, say, and the neighboring countries. So the selection of students you will meet is very, very wide, and that hasn't changed really compared to what we had in the past. Okay, jobs perspective for our students. So most of the students, and I'm talking specifically about economics, is most of the students will end up in, say, about half will end up in European or in the international institutions. So I'm specifically thinking about, well, the European Parliament, European Commission, the Court of Auditors, European Central Bank, and other institutions, but also a couple of people work, for example, at the EBRD or the OECD. Also, a big group, say about 20% of people end up in international businesses or think tanks. And so that's quite a big group of students as well who go up to scale, since they have the specific knowledge on European integration and European business, into international business. Some students also go into politics, and some students go on to do a PhD and choose an academic career. So that's more or less a job perspective you have. Since the year is very intensive, so it's a 1-year program in economics, only transatlantic affairs is a 2 years program. Often the program is, of course, very concise, very intensive during 1 year, so it can be very hard sometimes. But the link you can make with your next career is often very fast. So many students actually do find a job already when they study, or when they apply for a PhD, they immediately go towards the following programs. Okay, now for the applications, what you will need is basically a relevant university degree, and what that means is basically in practical terms is that you need a previous master's degree or a final university degree. Now, and please correct me if I'm making a mistake there, in the Irish system is very much a 4-year program still in the undergraduate system. Now that would give you 240 ECTS credits, and that should be sufficient to apply to the program typically.
Yeah, we've had that query before, Peter, from applicants from Ireland. I don't think absolutely every course, but I think most now have the 240, so it's fine, as you say.
Yeah, but that's because European universities on the continent, say, typically have 180 credits, and then sometimes it depends on what you have studied, whether you can apply or not. So with 180 credits you can, but you will need to have a lot of specialization in a specific field to be admitted. Okay. With 240 credits, that's typically not complicated at all. Okay, now in terms of the fees, now the fee of the college compared to other continental universities is high, no, compared to Irish universities, maybe not. With 26,000 euros is pretty high, but I have to say this amount covers everything, and with everything I mean that's both the tuition, but it includes as well the lodging and the full boarding during the whole year, so that means housing, food and so on. But as was said before, there are quite a couple of scholarships available specifically for Irish students, and as the number has doubled this year, there is certainly an opportunity. Now this should cover everything, so the scholarships are complete, and so that should allow you to go to the college without any financial worries. Okay, now this was pretty fast, so I certainly couldn't cover everything, but if you have questions, I will be happy to be here. Also, don't hesitate to write to this email, as I can then forward it to anybody who can answer the question decently, or I can try to answer myself if I have the knowledge to do so. And with this, I would leave the floor maybe now to Tony, who has been at the college for quite a couple of years, and he has been an academic assistant at the Department of Economics, and he knows a lot of these things in much more detail.
Okay, hi everyone. So first of all, I'll just give an overview of my own background. First of all, so I studied BES at TCD. So I specialized completely in economics in my 3rd and 4th years. And then I also did the MSc in economics at TCD. Then after doing the MSc in economics at TCD, I went to the college and I did the obviously the economics program, but I did the public policy analysis track at the college. So then after I left the college, I did 1 year at DCB, where I worked in macroprudential policy and financial stability. So basically kind of doing simulations of certain macroprudential measures on bank balance sheets. That was my main task, but there were other tasks included as well as a trainee. And then after that, I came back to the college, and I was at the college until the end of September. And now essentially I'm working on my own company in the area of online education. So essentially, so I have spent in total around 5 years at the college and in Bruges, so I have quite a good impression of what the experience is like there from the student, also the staff side. Um, so, so first of all, I think one of like the main advantages of going to the college is it's a very unique experience, uh, in the sense that it really helps someone if they wanted to develop a kind of a pan-European network, but also kind of a pan-European sensibility, I would say. And this is really kind of due to the structural nature of the college, which is that, you know, maybe it helps a bit to compare to, say, an Erasmus program. But I would say, like, when you go to the college, you're first of all, you're put into residence with students from other countries. So for example, me, I was in a small residence. It was a small residence at the time with 10 other students, but there were no other Irish students in the residence. So there were some Germans, Italians, French, and so on. And of course, you meet these students every day for breakfast. Then, of course, most of them tended not to be, none of them were in the economics program. So this also helped me kind of get to know other people from other programs and so on. So helping to build this kind of a esprit de collège, because it isn't as if you kind of come to the college and you'll only get to know economics students. You'd also get to know students in law, students in politics. So there aren't really strong barriers there between the different programs. But then, of course, because you also have, let's say, the canteen, when you go to the canteen, you end up sitting with other students from other countries and different programs as well. And of course, the conversations you have just in the course of the year, I think, really add a tremendous amount to just the student experience to the academic side, because you really end up discussing kind of European matters, European affairs, but also just different topics which are of kind of common relevance to people from across the EU. So I think that's for me. I think that was like the main thing I appreciated from the college, just getting to know people from other European countries, and that's really quite something. In terms of how it kind of differs to the economics program at Trinity, it very much focuses on, let's say, the application of economic theory to European policy. So we'll say, whereas, say, the master program in Trinity College, when I did in 2014, 2015, whereas that was very much focused on, say, developing methodology, kind of in econometrics, you're trying to derive certain estimators, you're proving the properties of those estimators. When it comes to economics at the college, you're really more focused on applying these tools or similar tools to European policy. So when you look at, say, the courses which are offered by the college in areas like, say, European banking, European environmental economics, they always try to make the link to European policy. And that's quite useful, because if you're then applying for jobs afterwards, and if you end up working, say, the ECB or the European Commission, you already have this kind of solid knowledge of the policy, where the policy debate is at. So you are then prepared to kind of hit the ground running if you will, say, get a position in these institutions. And then just another note, just to add a bit to what Peter said about the job outcomes at the college. Actually, on the website of the European Economic Studies Department, from, I think, the last 2 academic years, not including the one that just finished in June, but from the 2 years prior to that, there's basically a list of students with the jobs they got immediately after leaving the college. So if you kind of want to have some idea of what past students, what they ended up doing, you can go to look at that webpage, which is on the webpage of the college. So I think it's called Where Graduates Go. So you can find that quite easily. Also, just in other words, so if my statistics here are correct, basically, before I went to college in 2015, there hadn't been an Irish student studying economics at the college since around 2000. So there aren't actually that many economics alumni, recent, say, Irish economics alumni from the college. So in the past few years, there were 3. So one just finished last year. She's currently doing the traineeship at the ECB. One finished 2 years ago, and I think he started then working with the Department of Finance in the the Irish Government Economic Evaluation Service. But prior to that, of course, there weren't so many, which of course the question is, well, why was this the case? I think one is that there was kind of a requirement for French. So I think that maybe filtered out a lot of economics students who, I did French as part of BESS, but of course there were only around, I think, 15 of us in that class out of 200 students. So that's all immediately a big filter. But something that's changed in the last few years is that French is no longer really that much required if you want to study economics at the college, but it does mean that you just be focused on one track. So within the economics department, there are 4 different tracks, 3 for which French is compulsory, and 1 for which you probably won't have to do a French course, in which case you don't have to have a very strong knowledge of French. It's good to have a knowledge of French, and certainly an advantage when you're applying, because some communication in the college does take place through French. So it's good to have a certain knowledge of it, but this is something you can also work on over the summer before you start to college, if you want to get to an A1, A2 level, just so you can have some basic understanding. So if your French isn't very strong, don't let yourself be discouraged by that. You can still apply, but then you will be restricted to the economics track of the economics department. Another thing is that it's also, I think, a very good time to apply to the college, because, of course, I don't know if this is explicitly mentioned, but one of the reasons why the Department of Education has increased the number of scholarships for Irish students is because there is a shortage of Irish staff at the EU Commission, and a lot of the Irish staff which are there at the moment are on the cusp of retirement. So it was in an article in the Irish Times a few months ago, so this is public knowledge, but essentially the government wants to find some ways of increasing the number of Irish staff at the European Commission. So the European Commission does kind of apply some kind of quotas. They want to ensure that there's a certain kind of representative number of people from each country. So this means for some countries it's very hard for people from that country to get into the Commission. So if you're Italian, for instance, it's very difficult to get a position at the Commission because there are already so many Italians working at the European Commission. So, as an Irish person, you wouldn't be facing that disadvantage, but it would in fact work in your favour. So in that sense, it's a good time to apply. Also, with the issue with, say, the 6 scholarships is that in previous years, sometimes those scholarships have been split. So in fact, whereas there would have been 3 full scholarships, sometimes there were 6 half scholarships given. So depending on, say, the caliber and the number of candidates in every year, you could end up with, say, 12 people going with a half scholarship. So if you think, say, 6 is kind of quite a restricted number, you shouldn't let that discourage you from applying. You also have the Enp Scholarship. Again, when I was applying, I thought, well, that's to do with the European Neighbourhood Programme. Therefore, that doesn't really have much to do with the economics programme. So I said, okay, I wouldn't apply for the ENP programme. But you definitely can apply for that if you want. If you have some interest in the ENP programme, or you want to kind of write a thesis on the European Neighbourhood Programme. So definitely think about that. Don't just kind of rule it out ex ante, which is what I did when I was applying. And another point I would probably add just for the interview is that it's important to kind of take a position when you're asked a question. I was on the interview panel for the last 2 years as a representative of the economics department. And something which I noticed was that sometimes people tended to hedge a lot. They would say, well, I don't have all the information to make a view, to make a judgment to that question. And maybe that was kind of a way of not answering the question. But I think also it was just kind of, it was just kind of a tendency people have when they come from economics, is that they kind of tend to hold back a bit and not elaborate as much as, we'll say, someone who studied politics or someone who studied international relations or law would do, because they're very used to making kind of extensive verbal arguments. Whereas in economics, you tend not to do that as much. So maybe you haven't developed that skill. But if you're in the interview, I would strongly encourage you to really, you can hedge at the beginning if you want, saying, I'm not sure, I would be fully prepared to come to an immediate opinion on that question. But if I had to say then, then you should kind of fully elaborate what your answer is. And very important, I think, just to have a good knowledge of European affairs. There are lots of good websites, Eurointelligence, Politico.eu, who have different newsletters and so on. So if you are invited to interview for the college, it would be a very good idea to sign up for those, just so you know where the debate is at on different kinds of policy questions, because you might end up being asked questions that are not strictly economic in nature. So, for example, when Dermot mentioned the Gazprom question earlier, a student for the economics track was asked that question. So, I mean, Gazprom was very prominent in the debate, so it was a very prominent European affairs question. But if you're an economics student, you're probably not paying too much attention to what is mostly, I would say, an international affairs issue, international relations issue. It's an IR question. But it's important to have a good knowledge of European affairs, so don't fall for that trap by just kind of ignoring big areas of debate. I think that's probably more or less everything I had to say. One more final point, which I think was quite nice about the college, is that when you go there, there's quite a good opportunity to take language classes on the side as well. So, for example, I took a class in German as well when I was at the college. And there are classes in Italian, Spanish, also for beginners. So if you want to pick up another language, it's also a good time you can do those classes for free at the college. It's like 2 hours a week. You can also improve your French for another 2 hours. So then, 4 hours in total you could spend on free language classes, which is quite nice. I appreciated that quite a lot. But I think that's more or less everything I had to say. Those are the points I've prepared. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask me.
Thanks, Tony. I wonder if you have any questions from anyone who's in attendance, or anyone would like to pop anything in the chat.
While somebody's composing a question there or asking one, just to pick up on that last point Tony made, great point. Be in touch with European affairs, not just with European economic affairs, but also the European debate generally. So, in recent years, it's about migration from Syria. Should we keep them out? Then we had the Nord Stream gas pipeline. Are we going to be too dependent on Russia? So make sure you're well read up in the newspapers and some of those websites Tony referred to, because it'll mean that you're well prepared for the interview. And also, what's Ireland's position on these issues, or what should Ireland's position be? So be looking at things from more than just the economic angle and your own narrow field.
Maybe if I can add also a point that maybe we didn't mention yet, even if it was in the chat, but actually the deadline for applying is in 2 weeks precisely. So that's the 19th of January. Typically every year it's around the same day. So if you wouldn't be interested in applying now, but the coming year, the deadline is more or less mid-January.
Could I just mention, sorry.
We're going.
Could I just mention, Lisa mentioned the advent of Irish as a fully fledged European child this year. I had the distinction, I think, of being interviewed in 3 languages for the College of Europe, in English, Irish and French. I don't think anyone will be faced with that these days with our particular experience. But Peter made reference to the visiting professors. That's a very important thing, because you'd spend a lifetime traveling around the world to go through the number of people who will actually present themselves to you in Bruges, and it's the reputation of the college that enables them to attract these people. That people are very happy to lecture at the college and put it on their CV, even the people at the top of their grades. When I was there, we had Jan Tinbergen, who was a Nobel Economics Prize winner, lecturing to us, very brief series of lectures. And there was one thing that wasn't mentioned, which was very important in my day, and I'm not sure where it stands today, and that was the access that you have from Bruges. I mean, you're in a very central point there beside Brussels in Europe, and one of the things that we valued at the time was access to the Commission and to people working in the Commission. And if you're doing, say, your thesis or something like that, which I I had access to people in the commission who were working in the area. I took on price alignment, and I had access to people in the commission who were actually developing that program within the commission at the time. So you actually get access. So the location as well is very important. It can be a very good experience. The only other thing I'd say, Cormac mentioned the promoting John Hume, and certainly that is very worthy. And if you read, for example, Jada Legana's book on the EU and Northern Ireland, you'll see the extent to which John Hume, right through his career, was very active in the EU on behalf of Northern Ireland and changed an awful lot of the policy and brought Northern Ireland onto the stage. But we're faced with a slightly different position at the moment, in that Federica Mogherini has decided that the patrons have virtually all been men up to now, and she's on a women's binge at the moment. So it may be a few years before anybody gets a man in as a patron. But I suppose the thing is to stick with it. Thanks.
Yeah, in terms of the visiting professor, I mean, maybe I find it too obvious that students would maybe appreciate this, but indeed, having those people come to Bruges, which normally, if you would contact them these days by email or even by phone, it would be very hard to get direct access to those people. But if the students of the college can actually, if you're really interested in a certain topic, you can really work with these people, even if you choose a certain topic that is really of your interest and you would like to make your career in, for example. That's something that many students only appreciate too late sometimes, I think, when the year is already over its zenith, and then you appreciate it only towards the end. So if you really have a strong interest in whatever area, then that's certainly the best key to whatever happens after the college. That's something you always have to keep in mind. It's really amazing the kind of people you can contact in certain topics. And that gives lead, of course, to career options, but that's not the only part. It's also the interest in certain topics you can develop. And I think it was said in the beginning, I believe it was Cormac who said, you get in touch with these people, and even after 10, 20 years, you get in touch with these people again, and they still remember you. So that's nowadays people would call that networking, but I think it's simply interest in certain topics that are going in the same line and that help you develop in a certain area.
We popped a few links in the chat just for anyone who wants any more information about the different things that were mentioned there. Just so, for example, the European Neighbourhood Policy Scholarship, and interesting that Tony would highlight that it can be open to people applying to various different courses, maybe not just the ones you would think. And that's a separate application. So to be clear on that, but the Irish government scholarships, you'll automatically be considered for. And then that interesting section in the European Economic Studies Department's webpage where graduates go. It can be interesting to see that. And indeed, you can look at that on the different departments' pages as well. They each have a section, I think, where graduates go. A couple of others. Paul popped a few really interesting things into the chat as well. Thanks, Paul. Any other questions, folks?
Hi there. I might just pop in with a quick question, if that's all right. My name is Joe Harrington. I'm an international public policy and diplomacy student in UCC in Cork. I'm calling you today actually from France, but as a fellow Irish speaker, which I did languages for my BA, 2 languages in politics, and I was wondering, would that be something, in terms of what we can contribute as the Irish contingent in Brussels, or pardon, in Bruges? Do you think that the Irish students who go there every year bring a certain quality, or is there certain characteristics that you guys look for? Because I think the Irish, by nature, we are quite diplomatic, and I was wondering your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Peter, you might want to say something from the college's side, but
sure.
what I would say is that Ireland definitely needs to build up its numbers in the EU institutions again. It's kind of taken its eye off the ball because a lot of senior staff now in the EU institutions are retiring. So if you study at the college for a year, for example, I think you said you were studying, was it international politics? That's what you're studying?
National public policy and diplomacy. So it would be EU
Policy
focused. Yeah.
diplomacy, yeah. So, there's the IRD program, for example, at the college. You might be targeting that one. That'll give you a great grounding if you want to do the entrance competition called the concours for the EU institutions. That'll put you in a very good position. Um, somebody with your outlook, I'd definitely be recommending that kind of a career path to you. I mean, you saw that Peter showed there for the economics graduates. I mean, they're getting into all the very best international institutions, and there's demand for them. So far as Ireland is concerned, we're not coming with any colonial baggage. We didn't have an empire. Irish officials have always done very well. I know from visiting the institutions myself in whatever field they're working in. And now, of course, Ireland's an official language. This is something that does give you, a unique selling point. It's not going to get you any brownie points at the interview, in the sense that at the interview we want to see who are the students who have the most motivation and passion and interest and know why they want to study at the college. So that's what we'll be looking for at the interview. That's up to you to demonstrate, both in your application form, but also when you get to the interview. Right? So fill out the application form, put a bit of thought into it. And also, of course, I go back to the point of what will you bring to the college? So I'm not going to suggest what you might bring, but definitely I think you've suggested something that could be a new angle, going forward into the future. So do put a bit of thought into it. Put a bit of thought into how you present your application, but also be very familiar with current affairs when you're coming. Now, you're interested in, let's say, politics and diplomacy, but you also need to learn about things that are outside your strict frame of reference. So you need to know a little bit about the Court of Justice. What's its role? How does it interact with Ireland, for example, and the Irish courts? The same as a law student will know a lot about that, but they won't know much about international politics. But the good ones will, because they'll be keeping up with the websites and with the newspapers and following European debates. And so you should be taking that kind of approach. That's as much as I would say. Hope that's helpful.
Question. Mr. O'Connor made an interesting point that you found that in the interview process, a lot of students maybe were a bit reticent to give a strong opinion, maybe hedging their bets a little bit, or being a bit diplomatic, shall we say. And you explained the reasoning in terms of the economic side of that. Would that be a principle that would apply across the spectrum for the interviews? The different courses?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's no line to take on any issue. You've got extremely clever, independent people sitting across the table from you, and nothing impresses them more than somebody who has a position on something and can defend their position. So we've had students who are very skeptical about the European Union and about its prospects for future integration, and some of them have gone on to be scholarship winners to the College of Europe, because we're not interested in sending just people who toe the party line. We actually want people who are thinking creatively about their chosen field. So, you really can't hide your light under a bushel in the interview. It's quite short, so you've got to come out with quite focused and thoughtful answers, and that would impress the panel because it shows that you're reflective, you've got depth of thinking, and you're able to relate that to real world events. Absolutely, it applies to all applicants in whatever field.
And if I may add to that, Irish students are typically in very good standing. So it is not that we have a lot of doubts about the quality of Irish students, but something that maybe some students often get afraid of is say, oh, I don't have a degree of a high ranked university, and what does this matter? I think, as Professor Cahill said now in the beginning, the motivation you show and the reason why you want to come and the way you can convince with your motivation out there and then during the interview that you're a candidate that is eligible and more than eligible for the scholarship, that's something that we want to see, and that's regardless of the institution where you actually come from. And I have to say, as you asked for the Irish universities, I think all the Irish universities are in good standing, so that's not a problem. But you may be afraid, oh, maybe I'm not at this university or this university. Make a good motivation letter, prepare the interview, and then that will launch you much further ahead than what is on your curriculum written in the letters.
Could I come in there on a point and expanding something that Dermot said about Euroscepticism? When I was in the college, I mean, we weren't yet members, so we hadn't got maybe two defined views on the EEC at the time. But we had a certain amount of skepticism as well. But what I felt when I went to the college was that it was like a college of federalism, because the people in it, and particularly Rector Brugmans, had been motivated very much by the federalist thing. And there wasn't really any Euroscepticism in the college at the time. And I think looking at and listening to the speeches at the opening and the closing of the terms online in recent times, it did seem to me, and admittedly I couldn't properly make up my mind on it just from that, but I did get the impression that there was still very much that spirit around, and there wasn't very much questioning around of the European idea itself. And it struck me that that was an awful pity, because if you're with people who tend to share a basic concept with you, then the concept is very rarely questioned. And I would certainly like to see, or I would be happy to see, I was going to say a load of, but a certain amount of Euroscepticism in the college, because otherwise it becomes a sort of a seminary, a European seminary, which was almost what we were in, particularly, I suppose, dictated by the personality of the Rector Brugmans at the time. There was one subject which wasn't mentioned here, if you're briefing yourself for an interview, and that's Brexit. It strikes me, I mean, I've followed Brexit very closely, and I followed all of Barnier's things, and I've read Barnier's book and so forth. And it strikes me that Brexit has, from the British point of view, has underlined a total misunderstanding of how the community works, a willful one on the part of the British government, I'd have to say. But they didn't seem to understand during the negotiations that the EU is a law-based organization. In other words, there are certain areas which are delegated or pooled sovereignty or whatever to the EU, so the EU can operate in those areas. There are other areas which are national competences, and there is a mixture of these. And the obvious case is where the British were banging their heads against a stone wall trying to get the European Court of Justice out of decisions on how the single market was going to apply, particularly in the case of Northern Ireland. And I mean, this was a loser from the start. I mean, you're asking there to pull out one of the foundation bricks of the community as you walk out the door, and that's just not on. So that's from the British point of view. In spite of them having promoted the single market when they were there because it suited them, they were trying to basically bring it down when they were on the outside because it didn't suit them any longer. Now, from the European point of view, I noticed that the last British commissioner in doing a review of Barnier's book praised it a lot, but he was very grudging at the end, and he more or less said, well, at the end of the day, Barnier failed. He failed to get some sort of a reasonably working compromise with the British. Now, I've been following this thing right through, and I must say getting very angry a lot of the time. And for me, Barnier has done an absolutely magnificent job, because what Barnier did, and were it not for Barnier, in my book, what Barnier did was he held the 27 together. And that wasn't an accident. He spent 24 hours a day going around explaining to people, beating people over the head and doing the whole thing, and being very open and transparent. And he put his whole life for those few years into that particular task. And he has said himself that in many ways that the EU has emerged that little bit stronger from Brexit, purely from this exercise. So I wouldn't underplay the extent of the educational effect or whatever, or the understanding of the EU from just looking at Brexit. There are so many features of it that are sort of pegs for understanding other aspects of the EU. That'd be my view anyway.
That would
Any
be
other
excellent
questions or
interview
comments?
question.
Yeah, we did have an excellent candidate in a recent round who was unable to answer any questions on Brexit, and who was a fantastic candidate otherwise, and it was, quite surprising. So that was a candidate who wasn't reading the newspapers or watching the 9 o'clock news at all. So I think raising Brexit as an example there is a great point.
And as you mentioned, Dermot, other issues and more global issues, I think sometimes people, can think it'll just be, or some others might think it might be just on Brexit, whereas it really is a
it could
need.
be America, it could be China and Europe, America and Europe, Africa, whatever. Yeah.
I just got one question in we got by email in advance, so just to pass it maybe to Peter or whoever wishes to come in. And what advice would you have for a student who didn't do economics for their BA but would like to do the Masters in European Economics Studies?
Well, depending a bit on the degree they got before, if it was not economics, but you have enough quantitative skills, then it should still be possible. What I mean is specifically statistics or econometrics. Because without statistics and some basic knowledge of econometrics, that would be pretty hard. Now, we do have an introductory course, and Tony will know very well because he taught the course this year, and I believe also next year. If you don't have the basic knowledge of some quantitative skills, specifically statistics, you would probably get lost at some point in the economics courses, because you will have to read papers, reports when there's a lot of interpretation. And if you're not able to do that interpretation, then that would be hard. So there are more than economics programs that do have some statistical or even a very good statistical basis. So if the BA is from those areas, I wouldn't hesitate to apply. If it is without any statistics or even some econometrics, then it would be getting difficult, I would say.
Thanks for that, Peter. Anyone else? We might start looking to wrap up if there are any more final questions, and don't hesitate, or if any questions come to you afterwards, don't hesitate to drop us an email and we can pass it on to Peter and connect you, or you have Peter's email as well, or even with the alumni or any other people on the speaking panel today we can connect you with. I hope that everyone found it useful, and indeed anyone who's watching back later, we will be sharing this recording, and you can send on your questions if you didn't have a chance to ask live as well. Thanks to the college and to the department for the initiative to host such an important event, and to the wonderful speakers. Any final questions there, folks?
Could I just say, at the risk of being a total gatecrasher at this thing, just to complement the presentation, I mean, my views of the college are largely out of date, other than keeping in touch with the odd thing. And I found this a very comprehensive presentation and a very encouraging one. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul. That's exactly what we want to hear now in the new year. Start the year well.
I assume the check is in the post.
Yeah, I passed it on to you already, Paul. Chris, a few selection boxes. Okay.
Thanks, Lisa, name of the department and of the college. Thanks for organizing this event. And I would say spread the word, please. Don't hesitate to talk about the college, not just when there is an application round, but also throughout the year. Because if students are not interested now, they may be interested in the future, or may know somebody who wants to join in the future and think of some application in one of the departments. And we will always be happy to respond during the whole year to any questions that people may have.
And we do get some queries at any month during the year as well, Peter. Exactly. So it really is, if there are people here today as well considering applying but not sure they can meet the 19th of January deadline, it can be a longer term thing, and to consider applying again. It'll reopen in the autumn coming into winter, Peter, so not too far off either if people want to consider it for future years.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Okay, well, thanks to everyone for joining, in particular the participants, and for your great questions. And do keep in touch and let us know if you'd like any more information, or you can visit the websites there that we've shared. And yeah, thanks for joining.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, folks.